We started out with programs in the fall with scholars from the Humanities Council to help people learn how they might share and tell their family stories. And so after those 3 programs, then we said, well, what else can we do? And then we came up with this idea for the Share Fair, where everybody could bring the stuff, that's what I call it, the stuff that they had, and lay it out on tables, and people could look and talk. And that's the way it grew.
So today I'm Lucy Philbrick Sanborn. I was born in 1795. I married in 1814 to Jonathan Sanborn. And we lived together on the family farm that he inherited from his father. And our generations still are there today.
It's handed down to me from my parents and my grandparents, and I have lived around here since I was 8 years old. Grew up in Tilton, and this nice lady she raised me. She's my mother's sister, and we lived down in what's now Exit 20, and she sold her property to Blake many years around 1960, I think. And she owned the store, but she opened up in 1923, and when the war came, she could not get any more supplies. And so she applied for a job with the Forestry Service, because she couldn't get supplies for the store. And she worked as a plane spotter, and I don't know what the other title is, up on Benton Mountain over in, on Black Mountain over in Benton for 3 years during the war. And lived by herself with her little dog. And all of this is material. Her family lived around here for many, many years. And she was well qualified to work on the mountain because her father was a trapper and a hunter around here. And she's a very, very wonderful lady. Very, very wonderful lady. But these are cookbooks, particularly I have those, that go way, way back. And she was using them when I was a child. Very, very old.
Hi, I'm Fred Lawson, current owner of Proctor's Lake House Cottages over in the Weirs Boulevard, right near the bridge. And this is some of the memorabilia we have with us to show it today. This is the original bumper sticker from 1947 that the Proctors, when they called it Proctor's Cabins, put out for the guests on their cars. And we have samples of brochures that go back into the 40s also. Our current marketing materials, pictures and memorabilia on the walls of everything that Proctor's has done in the last, we've been there 16 years. And this is the original guest register from 1947, the first year that the Proctors were there. It goes back probably about 4 or 5 years when just everybody had to sign their name and address. And then we have some of the awards we've received from the Chamber when we redid everything to the current standard. There's a neat postcard in the back, a blow-up postcard. I always don't get it. This is what we look like today.
One of our original log books. This is all the original 8 guys that started our lodge right here in Meredith Ridge Village. They started at the Francis Russell Tavern. It was located right at where the Natural Food Store is.
Yeah.
And the Northway Drive Up. In those 2 areas, we were located there, and they incorporated as a lodge, and we've been a legitimate lodge, Freemason lodge, since 1819.
I have, over the years, inherited a lot of information, pictures, letters. Probably the most significant for me is, because it's the most time-consuming, are 30 years of diaries by my great-grandmother's sister, who lived in northern New York in a town called Rodman, which is off the beaten path. They're all written in pencil, and I've been trying to transcribe them as time goes by, but it's a long journey. I've been working on it for more than a decade, and I'm not even halfway through. Because each one I have to read with a magnifying glass. And this is a picture of me taken by my grandfather, who was a photographer at the Ogdensburg State Hospital in Ogdensburg. And then my husband's grandfather was very involved with housing in New York State. He was the commissioner of insurance. So I put some of his things on Louis Pink on housing in New York City. And then significant is my son put together a genealogy with different families over the years, and they're not all there, but he obviously spent a lot of time on that. So it's been fun to bring this stuff down here, and now I've got to figure out what to do with it. That's a major challenge.
I'm here to document the Save the Mill Society, which was formed in 1968 by a group of citizens, including Peter Karagianis, to save the mill because the downtown wanted to knock them down. A lot of people wanted the out with the old, in with the new. That was the mantra back at the 60s, and the group was successful. As you can see, the mill has been preserved. It's 190 years old last November, and it's now a center for Laconia's activities. We have art galleries and museums here.
Well, I rejoined the Belknap Mill board in early 2011, and the board, over a series of months and throughout the year of 2012, decided that they had to take some initiatives to increase the variety of programming and the nature of what was going on at the mill. Part of that process was developing a new logo and a new tagline. And the new tagline that we adopted was the Belknap Mill, where arts and history come to life. So to implement the arts to life portion of that, we began to work on several concepts, one of which was the development of the new art gallery on the first floor. And the second was to try to create some cultural events in the mill that were unique to this type of setting and which dealt with history and or the arts. And fortunately, at about the same time, Judy Buswell was working on a concept of converting some diaries, some family diaries, to a play, which was subsequently performed 2 nights here at the Belknap Mill, the first performances, and then subsequently went on the road. That was an extremely successful event. Out of that came the formation of a group at the Belknap Mill called the Humanities group. And as a consequence of Judy's play, we began to explore ways in which we could help people in the Lakes region bring to life the history of their families, their businesses, etc. About the same time, the Belknap Economic Development Council was trying to emphasize the development and expansion of what is called the creative economy in the Lakes region and beyond, which involved for-profit and non-profit people involved in the arts of various kinds, art, music, theater, etc. So the Belknap Mill, through its leadership, decided to work with the Economic Development Council and the Lakes Region Chamber of Commerce to participate in trying to develop the creative economy. So the initiatives in the arts, such as the play and so forth, became a part of that whole process. And it was the hope of the leadership of the mill that the mill could become a sort of hub for the creative economy, working with the Economic Development Council. Somewhat later, and yet to come, we had the opportunity to talk with someone who teaches at Plymouth State College, who happens to be a niece of mine, Sharon Paquette. And she had come up with the idea of converting a book of poetry to a 1 or 2 act play. That is going to be performed initially here at the mill in early April. And that book of poetry is entitled The Women at the Well, and is based on biblical figures going to the well and talking, obviously, women. And we expect that, like Judy Buswell's play, this is going to be very popular. It's going to be a premier event here at the mill, and then we'll go on the road elsewhere. We're hoping that the poet herself may be able to be here in early April when the play takes place. So those 2 initiatives, along with the Share Fair, which occurred recently at the mill as a consequence of the concept of trying to help families and businesses tell their story, talk about their history, have constituted the first projects of the Humanities group. And we are looking for additional ideas on how we can make history and art come to life here at the Belknap Mill.
I stumbled on some diaries and journals that belonged to my husband's great-grandmother. And since she's connected through marriage to Alan Rogers here, I wanted to read them. I started reading them, and I just got so fascinated. So I kept reading and reading and reading, and then I transcribed them. And then I thought, I just want to share this so much. Can I be the only one that's excited? So I've tried to figure out a way to do that, and I came up with the idea of this genre. It's not really a play, it's not really theater, it's just a combination of a lot of things. And thought, and actually worked with Kathy, your sister, to find the right venue, and this seemed like it because it's small enough, intimate enough, and a small production that just involved 2 people, myself and my daughter, who's a trained professional actress. And it worked perfectly. I was thrilled, with not only the number of people that came, but how inspired they were, and actually how it made them be very interested in what they might have, similar materials that they might have. And then Andre Paquette, who was the director of the mill at the time, we met together, and he was so excited about it and wondering how this could be enhanced, and we realized that there were other people out there that were doing similar things, such as Warren Clement, who had done a whole project on the Titanic and some of his relatives that perished on the Titanic, and Brenda Keene, who transcribed all these journals of Jeremiah Smith Jewett. So Andre said, well, let's pull together some of these people. So we did, and Elida Millam as well, who has a lot of journals, and I just heard about that. And then we asked some other folks, and we met here, and we talked about, what we might do. We also had Susan Haytham, McDonald Haytham, who's at the New Hampshire Humanities Council, and she gave us a lot of good guidance. So
when we first began to develop the Humanities group, we also had the opportunity to work with the New Hampshire Humanities Council on their Humanities to Go program. And because we are well aware and work with the Laconia Museum Historical Society, I was working here as a volunteer at the mill, and I approached Brenda Keene, who is the executive director of the Museum Historical Society, about co-sponsoring a series of 3 events in the Humanities to Go program. So that became another piece of the Humanities group activities.
This project was part of the Family History Initiative, and we were working in collaboration with the Belknap Mill to pull this information together. We saw it as an opportunity for us to make sure that people were aware of the importance of their historical artifacts, their family history. All too often, these items get tossed away in the trash, and they're significant to the history of our community and to those families individually. So I think we were successful, most certainly, in that endeavor. We were participants in a committee that was formed to develop this Share Fair event. We had weekly meetings for, gosh, I don't know, a couple of months. It was a great group effort. Everyone had their task assigned with marketing or retrieving historical images or coordinating the paperwork involved in registration. Everyone had their task to complete, and we really worked great as a team. We started off with a series of lectures and how to bring those stories forward. You know, if you sit somebody down in your family and say, okay, tell me some stories about our family, they're sort of on the spot and the stories don't come so easily. So these lectures really helped us to devise ways to get those stories flowing, how to record them, how to use them, how to share them. And that was, as a result, we came up with the Share Fair. We were really pleased with the attendance for all of the lecture programs. We probably had 50 to 60 people at every event, which is wonderful. The enthusiasm and the sharing within each of those events was wonderful. So once when we decided to put the Share Fair together, many of the same people were very, very interested in participating, and at the event, the enthusiasm that was felt and the networking that happened among the exhibitors, which was really what we wanted to happen, was definitely there. So it was absolutely a success, and I'm looking forward to doing at least something similar in the future. Let me explain how I got started with this whole project. When my children were little, I used to bring them to the library all the time and I told them if they can read about something, they can learn anything they want. So we made regular trips to the library, and one day I was talking with the librarian about a historical fiction novel that I just read, and as coincidences would have it, the then executive director of the Laconia Historical and Museum Society stepped forward and said, "Hey, do you have any volunteer time?" And so I asked her what she had in mind, and she said that she was putting together a Civil War exhibit, and that they had just received a donation of journals. There were 9 journals written from the mid-1800s, 1850 to 1905, that were written all by one man, and in the journals there was a chronicling of Lincoln's assassination. And so I said, sure, I would do that. And the journals are all written in quill. Some of the letter formations are a little unfamiliar to us folks. Of course, the terminology is a little bit different. So it took a little bit of time, even though it was a one-page entry, it took a little bit of time to put it together. But, the folks back then spoke so eloquently and wrote so beautifully, and it took just that one entry for me to be hooked. And so I said to myself, all right, I will transcribe this one journal. Again, there were 9 in the series. And, you start getting involved with this person's life. You're reading their innermost thoughts for 48 years of his life. And I got hooked. I found myself traveling in his footsteps. This particular gentleman had a general store in Warren, New Hampshire, and the general store housed the only telegraph in the area. So not only was he chronicling his own life, but he was chronicling national and local history, which included Lincoln's assassination. And one thing that really fascinated me about that entry was the speed with which he was informed of the assassination. In my mind, I'm thinking, it must have taken a week for news to spread across the country, and he heard that next morning. So just an amazing amount of information chronicled in this everyday life of this person who had such a significant part in the history of Laconia. His family owned property from Spring Street to High Street, and during the 1905 Laconia Old Home Day, he sold the property to the Laconia Hospital Association, and then in turn return those funds to them so that they could begin building a hospital. So pretty significant. If it weren't for Jeremiah Smith Jewett, in all likelihood, the Laconia General Hospital wouldn't be here today. So pretty important person in our history. Jeremiah Smith Jewett wrote about everything that he did and everyone that he visited with. And one of the interesting stories for me was when he talked about going to Fall River by train to visit the Lizzie Borden trials. And he sat through all of the trials, and in the end he said they made the correct decision to acquit her. Sorry. Yeah. But back then, you know, those people had to make do with what they had. So they found themselves doing a lot of things maybe that they were untrained to do. But he practiced dentistry. He practiced veterinary medicine. He was a doctor at times. He assisted with autopsies. Certainly performed law. Gosh, I mean, he was just involved with everything. So pretty interesting lifestyle. And regardless of the trials and difficulties that they had in their life, they were always incredibly optimistic and willing to attempt anything. So
I've done a lot of community theater. It's been a while, but I did in college. I was a music major, but I also did theater, some stuff. And then with the streetcar company, I did productions. So I wanted to incorporate a number of intake channels. So it wasn't just a lecture, but music, theater, there's a little bit of choreography in there. I had slides, visuals going on that reflected what we were talking about, but also could draw people in. It was a reader's theater because I knew that we would be doing this not consecutively, but on and off, and there was no way that we could keep all that script in our heads. So we used scripts, and it seemed to be worked just fine. We had a professional director, Faith Rupert, who is retired as the drama theater person at Guilford High School, and she worked with Tammy, who, while she was a student there, and actually got her started on a path to theater. We had costumes, that was another aspect. So, and minimal props, and things were clicking. I just was able to find things that fit. The other thing is, and this is important, is I wanted to make sure that it was grounded historically and that I wasn't going off on some tangent. So fortunately for me, I have a sister and her partner who are PhD scholars, one in theater and film and the other in Victorian women's studies. They live in Boston. Now, wouldn't I have been crazy if I didn't take advantage of that? That's why I thought, the stars are all aligned, get busy. And so I went down there and visited them, talked to them all the time. They read the script and, helped me shape it. They looked at the illustrations. So they were sitting in the front row when I did it too. So I felt relatively comfortable that I wasn't going out on a limb saying something that wasn't accurate. They also helped because this was a story about a woman, an upper middle class woman in an relatively urban area. So I wanted to make sure I got the tone and the tenor right of that, because of course that's not every woman's experience, but that was hers, and it was fascinating to me to realize what her struggles were.
Well, the participation has been great in all of the events, and as I said, Judy's play kicked it up, and we had 2 nights of the play here, and we had over 120 people at each of the performances, which is a nice size to have both the performance area and the seating capacity here at the Belknap Mill on the 3rd floor. So we can handle events for 125 to 150 people that involve bands, orchestras, small orchestras, chamber music, plays, or whatever. So we've been very pleased with the response, and each event, interestingly enough, has generated new ideas that will come to fruition down the road.
One outgrowth of this is an interest in genealogy. So we are about to organize a class because we were able to find 4 people who have taught genealogy and have a process that really works. And so we're going to have an organizing meeting of that next month.
So effectively by April, we'll have participated in 4 events. We continue to participate with the Economic Development Council in exploring how to improve the creative economy in the Lakes region. And as I said, we're looking for additional ideas to bring plays, music, chamber music, whatever, to the Belknap Mill to expand our collaboration with for-profits and non-profits. And we're particularly pleased that we were able to cooperate on one of those projects with the Museum Historical Society.